Hello, and welcome to another edition of what I hope is fast becoming your favourite recycling podcast. I'm not sure how many recycling podcasts there are out there in the market, but I hope this one will find a space on your, in your weekly listening to keep up to date with all things recycling oriented, certainly with an Australian perspective, potentially with an Irish accent, but with an Australian perspective. But obviously we touch on topics that cover nearly all countries. So in today's episode of Recycle, Don't Be a Waster, I want to talk about a concept that you'll be hearing much more about in, I suppose, over the next couple of years, 5 years or so. And that is what is called EPR, meaning Extended Product or Producer Responsibility. So what is this concept? Fundamentally, the concept is when you go into a store and you buy even the most simple product, you purchase a bottle of soft drink. So you buy a bottle of your favorite soft drink, whether it's from the coca-cola company or Pepsi Cola or one of the other big manufacturers, and you drink the drink and you throw away the bottle, the plastic bottle. If you do the right thing, you put it into the recycling bin, but oftentimes there may not be one available. So in very many cases, that product may end up in general waste. This applies to so many aspects of things, pretty much every manufactured good that you can purchase. But I suppose the question is, you've gone and bought your soft drink. Let's just say for simplicity, it costs $1. That product costs $1. The manufacturing of the plastic container costs a couple of cents at the most, and there's a lot of profit in it for the manufacturer. The question is, disposing of that product, disposing of that bottle, who actually pays for it? In nearly all cases, let's say 99.9% of cases, it's not the company that manufactures the product. So we have what economists here call an externality issue. Somebody is producing a product that serves one purpose, and that is to contain the soft drink just long enough to be put in the fridge for you to purchase it, for you to drink it, and then to throw it away. It serves no other purpose, and that's all the manufacturer to a large extent thinks about. Obviously I'm generalizing here. We can, a lot of big corporations do put effort into, manufacturing and using more recycled materials, but the general gist of what we're trying to get at here is that when you have a manufactured product, it serves its purpose, it's disposed of, but the disposing of it, the recycling of it, the taking the useful materials from that product, all those aspects, nobody really thinks about. No one has to think about them. The manufacturer has no legal responsibility in many countries. Once the product has left their shelves, that's obviously there's quality control issues. They have to make sure it's health and safety compliant. But the disposal of it, the recycling of it, the environmental aspect of that product is really not their concern in many cases. And this is where extended producer responsibility, EPR, comes into the question. I suppose the concept is that the person who makes something has to consider the life cycle of that product. And the life cycle doesn't just mean its useful life, it also means the destruction or the disposing or the recycling of the materials, of the container, of the packaging, of whatever it's made from. And, if you have to consider what is done with this product, the way it would be disposed of, that really changes the financial, the economic, all the commercial, proposition of making something. Let's take the example. So say you can put it into a glass container. The glass container would be more expensive to transport because it's heavier. It's probably more expensive to make. Certainly transporting it's heavier. All those aspects, you might have more breakage in shipping. But the disposing of it, the recycling of that material is probably cheaper if you really capture all the economic negatives, versus plastic. So with a glass container, it won't form part of the Pacific garbage patch. It won't break down into microplastics. It won't enter the food stream. It won't sit around in the environment for thousands of years polluting. Whereas with glass, it's easier to recycle. It can be recycled indefinitely. It's a sterile material, so it doesn't poison the atmosphere, the environment or animals. And so there's potentially the long-term economic cost to dispose of glass is lower versus plastic. So it completely changes the economic rationale behind choosing one product versus another. So the movement towards EPR really is trying to make sure that the manufacturer considers the long-term cost of the materials they choose. They consider the ability to recycle them, the cost of doing it, and tries to capture that in the decision making at the start. Because if we don't consider the long-term cost of doing something, we tend to do it too much. We throw away items that in reality have value or cost. And so in this instance, you could take the example of legislation, and there's many different methods that companies are going down this line of extended EPR. Some are voluntary, some are more mandatory, some are, I suppose, voluntary before they become mandatory, and those aspects. But a lot of the bigger manufacturers, particularly in Europe, North America, they're starting to really consider these items, these aspects. And you'll see this whereby manufacturers are starting to invest in their own in-house recycling programs, their own in-house recycling collection programs, or really looking into putting in place better, more recyclable materials, in those products. So, like the example we could give would be Nespresso pods. Coffee pods are notoriously difficult to recycle for the fundamental reason that they are, you'll hear this again and again on our podcast, they are products made from more than one material. They can be made from a plastic pod covered by an aluminium top. And when you get those combinations of materials, and obviously then filled with organic compound, in the coffee beans or the coffee grounds, when you get stuff like that, it's very difficult to recycle. So companies such as Nespresso are taking the lead and working with other companies like TerraCycle and similar to offer collection facilities for those pods to offer the option of recycling them, which is a longer term product stewardship, is another term people use. It's a methodology of internalizing that external cost and taking ownership of it. So when they're making something, they're considering the longer term impact of it. You'll see this, I think you're going to see this increasing in so many consumer aspects, certainly in the single-use plastic aspects, certainly in soft drinks containers. I think you'll see it with the big corporations. I think you'll start to see it in products like beauty products, toothpastes, those sort of aspects, whereby the manufacturers tend to be very large corporates, with large research departments who can look into solutions. And, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I've read previously that, of single-use plastic, or of the plastic that enters our oceans, say 50% is made by, let's say, 10 corporations, mega corporations. And obviously the people who buy it, who dispose of it, it is their responsibility. But, when you're manufacturing a product, do you think that the person who manufactures it should also consider the environmental aspects of its disposal? I think that's a rational argument. I think you can certainly make the argument for it. Clearly, the best option would be if the companies making things, did that themselves and voluntarily looked into product stewardship and those sort of aspects. But I think, the way the world works, I think increasingly you will see governments and, even international organizations pushing for more legal frameworks behind this sort of stuff. I think you're going to certainly see it in those product materials or consumer products, simple ones that I've mentioned. But I think you'll also see it in aspects such as e-waste, machines and consumer gadgets. I think you will start seeing legislation dictating that they have to be recycled in easier manners, manufactured in ways that they can be recycled, and also putting in place systems whereby probably the manufacturers or the retailers have to pay to some extent to recycle them, or to ensure that a certain aspect or proportion of them don't end up in landfill and end up actually recycled the way we hope they are. I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest believer in the effectiveness of legislation. Oftentimes it just layers more red tape on top of people. But it's a tricky one. I think, can we rely on corporations who are profit focused to take the lead and to really reduce packaging? Or to take ownership of it? I'll be honest, you probably can't. anybody who, like, to me, it still amazes me that you can walk into a supermarket anywhere in the world and near the end of 2021. I'm recording this in December 2021. And the amount of plastic on shelves, it hasn't decreased. Plastic packaging, that in many regards is superfluous, in many regards doesn't add anything to the appeal of, say, fruit or veg, but it's still in plastic bags and plastic packages. We've known about this problem for years, and nobody seems to make any headway in reducing it. So you'd have to be doubtful that corporations off their own bat will make that change. And so in that gap, as government always does, if they see an opportunity to increase their presence, I think they will. So I would forecast, my prediction is, in the next 5 to 10 years, you'll see government legislation dictating that manufacturing, whether local or imported, has to have an EPR element. And that EPR element certainly will increase over time. And again, the other reason it will increase is our waste problems are getting bigger. The Pacific Garbage Patch, and I mentioned that one, but there's many other conglomerations of floating debris. That's just the most famous one, and it's the most famous because it's the largest. But I think there's like 5 or 6 other ones. So this problem is not going away. This problem will only increase in severity, and that will make it more. It will raise the alert level, let's say, for consumers, for advocacy groups, for governments, for authorities to really have to start to look at this stuff. Plastic pollution is something that I think a lot of people have focused on the environment, as in CO2 and global warming, but I think the destruction of habitats and certainly the proliferation of plastic packaging, I think, is something that we will really take more focus on in the years ahead. So, okay, there's a heads up. Check out for EPR. When you hear about it, you'll know what it is. And I'll be, of course, as always, here on Recycle, Don't Be a Waster. I'd be interested in having your feedback or just hearing what you think about this topic, any topics you'd like me to discuss in the future. And obviously our intention here is, as we grow our listenership, get some, more listeners per podcast, etc. We intend to bring on guests on the show who we can chat with, people who might know certain things about recycling or, have views on the topic. So yeah, that's our intention over time. I think at the beginning we have to just, get started. I think this is our 6th or 7th podcast. Just get into it easily. And then over time we'll just expand that conversation and bring more people on. So I'll leave it there today. Have a great weekend. Bye.